Now, unto the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, pardon me, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. That'd be a great way to start and finish every day, is with that doxology. Well, we talked about the King eternal. Let's talk about the King immortal. Right, if he's eternal, then obviously he's immortal, right? Yes. And let's think about what immortal carries with it in terms of meaning. First of all, you and I are mortal. Now, what that means is there is a beginning to our life and there will be an ending to our life, right? The mortality aspect, as we've been in this pandemic, one of the mathematical statistical factors is the mortality rate, meaning how many people die because of COVID. And so we're pretty aware of this idea of our mortality, or are we? I don't want to be critical. Well, maybe I do want to be critical. Here's the thing. A whole lot of us live as if we believed we're going to live forever. We're not. Well, on one hand, yeah, we will. Either we will live forever in God's kingdom in a glorified form, whatever that's going to consist of and look like. We have glimpses, we have ideas, or, and by the way, in the words of my friend Kevin Oder, it's all good all the time. In that case, yes? Or endless torment in a place called hell. We are mortal. God is not. Sometimes I think, not only do we act as though we believe we were immortal in the sense that we're going to live forever, this life is all there is, and so, but we also often act as though God were like us. We get the whole thing turned around. You see, we are made in the image of God. This is an honor, isn't it? But what we have often done is we have made God in our image. There's a variety of reasons why this happens. One is it's easier for us to deal with a God that is like us than it is to deal with a God who is unlike us. Now, I don't particularly want a God that is like me. And there's a lot of ways I don't want a God who's like me. Number one, there's a limit to my patience. And often, though I wish it were not this way, often the limit to my patience has a very small threshold. It's a very low ceiling. I don't want a God who is physically limited as I am. I can be in one place at one time, and that's it. I need a God who can be everywhere all at the same time. I don't want a God who knows a lot maybe, but that's it. I need a God who knows everything. I don't want a God that is locked into time and space and all of the limitations that I'm locked into. I want a God who reigns outside of time, whose sovereignty, whose control extends beyond time. I don't want a God who can rule a few things as I might be able to if I were in a position to rule. I want a God who can rule over all. I don't want a God who is limited because I only have one language. So if you're going to talk to me, you're going to have to talk in my language. Can I go on and on and on? I want a God who understands Korean and Russian and Spanish and Portuguese and Czech and Hungarian and on and on. I want a God who does not have the limits that we mortals have. Now, a God who doesn't have the limits that we have as mortals is difficult for us to comprehend and is kind of threatening. Right? It's easier to manipulate a God who is like us than a God who has permitted us and created us to be like Him. When we get that turned around, all sorts of bad things are going to happen as a result. And a little social commentary here. The world, and particularly American culture, is now reaping what we have sown because we have turned that around. When we are divine, when we are God, when we make God in our image, eventually the consequences are going to come into play, and they are playing out with pretty profound results. And frankly, in my opinion, not positive results. When we forget that we are not God, and God is not the way we want Him to be, the way we invent Him to be, God is immortal. Cool. And then he says invisible. This is also a very difficult thing about God. It's easier to deal with things you can see and your five senses can interact with. This is not the case with God. Idolatry, in the first century sense, in its most primary sense, of the break with the second command of the 10, make no graven or fashioned images. Why would humans be seemingly constantly drawn to make images? Because they can. There's probably a whole bunch of reasons, but the two I can think of that I think are most germane to what we're talking about. Number one, there might be something safer about a statue that I can move around and manipulate than a God who cannot be moved around and manipulated. All right, there's some false emotional security in that. And the second thing is, it is hard to conceptualize what you cannot see. I'm a pretty concrete kind of guy. I enjoy working in the world of ideas, but books of prophecy in the Old Testament and in the book of Revelation in the New are a little bit difficult for me because it's hard for me to visualize what the prophets are describing there, things that defy our language and vocabulary. When I can't see it, it's hard. Now, there's this other aspect. There's the old saying, seeing is believing. And there's the old evangelical saying, believing is seeing. It's very difficult for me to have a firm belief in what I cannot see. I can't see the outcomes of the prayers that I ask of God. I want to believe that He will do for me what is best. I don't always know what that is, and sometimes I don't want what is best. I want what I want. Well, seeing is believing, believing is seeing, seeing is the deal. God is invisible. The invisible God is more real than what my five senses can verify. This is why faith is central. Now, I'm not just talking about the belief side of faith. It's, well, okay, I believe that. See, I believe the law of gravity because I have proven it out in my own life. I came down hard when I went up. I believe the mail's going to be delivered today because it's been delivered that way every day so far. And so, but to believe what I cannot see, something that is beyond my five senses, that's hard for me. Other people don't find it so hard, I'm sure, and it's not because they're naive, and they're wired differently. And if you sometimes struggle to have a firm, secure faith in a God you cannot see, and for outcomes that you can't yet see, for work that you don't particularly see God doing in the world, welcome to the human race. Again, God is eternal, and in a sense, so are we. This is one of the ways in which God made us like Him. He is immortal. We are not. We are not immortal. We are mortal, meaning we had a beginning and we're going to have an ending. God had no beginning and He has no ending. It will break your brain trying to figure out how can that be. He is invisible. Well, we are fully visible, right? So I guess I'm thinking, doesn't that kind of just imply, don't get confused about this. You're not God. I'm not God. Some people are more godly than others, and I won't deny that. I would like to be one of those people. But, see, as if there was I don't think there is a more important point to begin with, which says, hey, you're not God. So don't act like you are. Don't think like you are. Don't let the world convince you. Don't let our enemy, the enemy of your soul, convince you that hey, do what you want. You're God. No. And you know what? I don't think there are very many of us who would blatantly say, well, I'm God. I can do whatever I choose. But the New Age movement has kind of gotten less and less airtime and print time, but it still exists. And one of the fundamental ideas of the New Age theology is you are a God. You're the God of your universe. No, you're not. So don't act like it. Don't think like it. Don't forget. God is God, and you're not. Well, maybe that was more for me than for you. But that's where I'm going to stop this morning for me as I record. And we'll come back and finish up this glorious doxology next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.